Today we're going to continue talking about factoring, but we're going to focus on solving, so when there's an equal sign. So the first thing we need to remember is that zeros, roots, solutions, and x-intercepts all mean the same thing. So whenever you see one of these four words, you know they all mean the same thing. And we're going to focus on the definition of x-intercepts because we know what that looks like on a graph. So there's two different ways to solve these. It depends on how it's presented. So one way is to solve algebraically. So your first step is to make the trinomial equal to 0. So we're going to set this equal to 0. That's step one. Step two is to factor. And that's what we just talked about. So I have, this is really a 1 in front. So 1 times negative 3 is negative 3. My middle number is negative 2. And let's factor this. So I got negative 3 times 1 gives me negative 2. And there's my factor pair. So that's going to give me x minus 3 and x plus 1. I do not need to divide out this 1 because that's not going to change anything. So there's my factor pair. And then I need to do step 3, which is to set each factor equal to 0. So this is going to be equal to 0. And this one is going to be equal to 0. That's because when I multiply 0 times anything, it's going to give me 0. So one of these has to be equal to 0. So then step 4 is to solve for x, or whatever the variable is. So I'm going to add 3 to both sides to solve for x. So I get x equals 3. Then I'm going to subtract 1 over here. I get x equals negative 1. So my solutions, roots, zeros, and x-intercepts are 3 and negative 1. So then what happens if it's not equal to 0? So sometimes that's going to happen. All you do is you need to make this side equal to 0. So to get rid of this 5, I need to subtract 5. So 5 minus 5 will be equal to 0, which is what I want. But I need to do that on both sides. So I'll have x squared minus 7x plus 10. 15 minus 5 is 10. And now that's equal to 0. So that's step 1. Step 2 is to go ahead and factor. Okay? There is no greatest common factor. Well, it's 1. If I divide that out, it doesn't change anything. So I'm going to go ahead and make my t-chart. 1 times 10 gives me 10. And then my middle number is negative 7. So we got negative 2 and negative 5. If I add those together, those make negative 7. There's my factor pair. So I have x minus 2 and x minus 5. Again, I don't need to divide by this 1. So then that is going to be my answer for the step number 2. Step 3, set them equal to 0. So x minus 2 equals 0. X minus 5 equals 0. And then step 4 is to solve for x. So I'll add 2 to both sides. That gives me 2. Add 5 to both sides. That gives me 5. Alright, so you might have noticed in these two examples, I started out with negative 3 and my answer became a positive 3. I started with positive 1 and my answer became negative 1. Here, I had a negative 2 and it changed to a positive 2. And here, I had a negative 5 and it changed to a positive 5. So when we go from factors to zeros or zeros to factors, you can just change the signs. So instead of negative 3, it's going to be a positive 3. Instead of positive 4, it's going to be a negative 4. When I go from zeros, roots, solutions, x-intercepts to factors, I need to change my signs. So I'm going to put x in front. Instead of negative 2, it's going to become a positive 2. Instead of 4, it's going to become a negative 4. You also might want to try to solve this graphically. So if you want to do that, your first step is to put your trinomial in y equals. So I'm going to go ahead and put this into my y equals. And then it says second step, graph, and then second trace 2. So I'm going to press graph. Okay, there's my picture. So second trace, and then number 2 says 0. So remember, zeros, roots, solutions, x-intercepts. That's what we're looking for here. All right. So then step 3 says pick a point to the left of the 0, then to the right, and press enter. So you can see this says left. So here's my 0 right there, my x-intercept. So I want to go to the left. All right, and I'm going to press enter. Then it says right. So now I need to go to the right side of this 0. So maybe like right there. Guess, you don't have to put in a guess. You can just press enter again. So then our 0 is -1. One of our zeros. All right, and then it says repeat for the other 0. So again, second trace 2 for 0. Now I'm looking at this one. So I need to be on the left. Okay. Then I need to be on the right. And see, these arrows are tell us where they're looking at, the window that they're looking at, and our 0 is in between them. So again, we don't need to put in a guess, we can just press enter. So then it gives us our other 0, 3. All right, so same idea as over here. If it's not equal to 0, we need to make it equal to 0. So if we subtract 5, that'll make 0, but we need to do it on both sides. So that's going to give me x squared minus 7x plus 10 equals 0. So again, I'm going to go to my y equals and put that in. Okay, again, I'm going to hit graph. Second trace, number 2 for 0. And then again, we need to go to the left side. We're going to start with this 0. So anywhere to the left, anywhere to the right, enter, so 2. All right, so then we're going to find this one. So second trace 2, the left of this 0, the right of this 0, enter, gives us our other answer, 5. So now if you're graphing, or they give you the graph, and they say, okay, go from zeros, or roots, or solutions, or x-intercepts, and they want the factors, just like over here, we're just going to change the signs. All right, so here we can see that's crossing at 1, 2, 3, -4, and 1, 2. So then my factors would be, instead of -4, would be +4, and instead of +2 would be -2. So that is how you find solutions to quadratics.